Hey, this is Idea Coaches for Cochise. We're on the weight classes episode 11B, the review of UFC 139. Before I get into this, I'm going to talk about a couple of fights that have been taking place outside the UFC at the same time. First off, M1 Global, I don't know the entire name for it. Fedor Emelianenko versus Jeff Monson. Rather of a boring fight, so I'm going to spoil it for you. Fedor wins. He was strategic in his fighting. Wasn't as wild as he was in the Bigfoot Silva fight. I'm glad to see him back on the winning circle. So that being said, let's go on to Bellator 58. I did not get to see the entire event. However, the main event, Eddie Alvarez versus Mike Chandler, fantastic fight. Not only that, you can see it on YouTube right now. Just type in Eddie Alvarez versus Michael Chandler, Bellator 58, fantastic fight. Someone online was talking about how it was the greatest fight he's ever seen. No, it's not, but at the same time, it's a damn good fight, especially for free. So if you have any time, go and check that fight out. Bellator has actually been really impressing me with their events as of late. It's just unfortunate that they're landing on the same days as UFC events, thus kind of getting, put to the back burner. Okay, let's get into the UFC 139 preliminary fights. Seth Balninsky versus Matt Brown. I had no idea who Seth was, but the real problem is Matt Brown really needs to work on his submission choke defense. I think every loss I've seen him in, he's been choked out. He's a good fighter, but he just can't protect his neck. Whether it's an arm choke, a rear naked choke, a triangle choke, he just can't protect his neck for some reason. I mean, this is almost Takanori Gomi bad. And before you call me a hater, Takanori Gomi is my favorite fighter of all time. I know he's not as good as he used to be, but he's the one who really got me into watching MMA at a consistent level. I thought Matt Brown had this thing in the bag, and the thing is that Seth had his neck in trouble at the end of the first round, and then he just finished him off in the second. So Matt Brown, good fighter, but he really needs to work on protecting his neck. I mean, seriously. Okay, now let's get into the Gilson Paybao versus Rafael Dos Anjos. I saw Rafael losing this to the split decision as well. The first round and second round was all Paybao. The third round, Rafael was getting a lot better, but I think that the second round he was just so far behind that there's no way that they could award the split decision to Dos Anjos. Good fight overall. Now let's get into the Stephen Bauer versus Kingsbury fight, a fight which I actually did preview in episode 11A. I called Bonner winning, and that's exactly what happened. But the problem is that this was the fight that kind of started the theme of questionable scoring by the judges, with Bonner receiving a 10-8 round for, I believe, round 3 or something like that. No, not 10-8, I'm sorry, a 30-25, a very lopsided, weird scoring criteria which the judges used to award Bonner the unanimous decision. Luckily, that did not affect the overall outcome of the fight and determine who wins and who loses, but it's still kind of strange. This leads me to the very next fight which I called, and also the next fight on the card itself, was Martin Kampmann versus Rick Story. I got my notes here. The thing is that Martin Kampmann, I felt won round 2 and 3 pretty obviously. The damage which Rick Story dealt in round 1, especially towards the body, I don't think was enough to justify a split decision. So once again, the scoring was a little bit weird, but it did not affect the overall outcome, and I think we're kind of lucky with that. Story is still throwing wild punches, and the welterweights in the UFC do not have the timing to really crack Rick Story, probably outside of Paul Daly or Nick Diaz, which I don't think he's up there in the ranks yet to fight anyway. Fight was kind of on the boring side, but at the same time, I was not expecting fireworks for this fight either. So let's move on to the Brian Bowles versus Uriah Faber fight. Man, now this was the California kid that the people who were following Uriah Faber during 2007 were talking about. This is the first, my very first experience of watching Uriah Faber live was actually his first loss to Mike Thomas Brown. That was a very bad way to be exposed to Uriah Faber. After that, Uriah Faber was very hot and cold, winning some fights, losing others. He fought Jens Pulver twice. He did not look good against Jose Aldo. He dropped down to bantamweight. He's had a lot more success. And the thing is that I didn't know about Uriah Faber, but I was watching his fights after they had happened, and unfortunately I was watching them after I already knew he was going to win. So when you're watching fights like that, you're just waiting for the outcome to happen. I mean, when you're seeing someone you know who's going to lose, you're actually, he's walking into the power. He's not going for the takedowns. He's not slicking up with his combinations. I do it, my friends do it, people I've seen on different forums talk about fights, they tend to do it as well, at least what I infer from their texts. At the same time, this was a magnificent performance by Uriah Faber, and I was very surprised that Brian Bowles did not really get any significant offense going at all. I mean, he's a good fighter, but maybe Faber's his poison. And he was actually talking about watching out for getting guillotines and chokes in a pre-fight interview I saw somewhere on YouTube. I can't remember it right now. Now let's get into the outcome I don't think anyone besides me called, and that was Wanderlei Silva versus Cung Le. A lot of people were going with Cung Le from what I've seen. I'm very glad Silva won, not because I picked him, but because if Wanderlei Silva was to lose, which I don't mind him doing, I want him to lose to a full-time fighter, because that could have been his retirement. You know, if, Matt Hughes, also Josh Koscheck, okay. Crow Cop got retired by Roy Nelson, okay. BJ Penn may or may not have been retired by Nick Diaz, okay. Randy Couture retired by Lyoto Machida, all okay. But Cung Le, someone who has not had a fight in a couple of years, had no ambitions on defending his middleweight Strikeforce championship. I don't see. It would just be wrong for him to retire a legend like Wanderlei Silva in mixed martial arts. If this was a kickboxing fight, you're going to retire Wanderlei, that's okay. But in MMA, I just felt something was very wrong with that. Usually, I don't like to let my emotions get into these picks. It's worked for the Nogueira versus Brendan Schaub, but it failed me miserably with Nate Diaz Takanori Gomi when I called Gomi. But Wanderlei Silva came through looking the last minute or so really looking like vintage Wanderlei. So I'm very happy about that. Cung Le is a great fighter. I just did not want him to retire Wanderlei Silva. That was the biggest problem that I had. Now, let's talk about the main event. Shogun Rua versus Dan Henderson. Really, the thing is this. When Shogun lost the first round, it doesn't really say too much losing the first round to Dan Henderson, because the past 3 fights Dan Henderson has lost. Rampage Jackson, Anderson Silva, Jake Shields. He's won the first round. So when he won the first round, I wasn't really taken back by it, but the second round really started to look bad for Shogun. The third round, and this is pretty much the determining whether you felt that the fight was a draw or that Henderson won by a split decision. I don't think he won by a unanimous decision personally. I think that scoring was a little bit off. Is whether or not you count Henderson's third round as a 10-8 round. Because it's pretty obvious that Shogun had a 10-8 round in the fifth, but the third round is depending on whether or not you think Henderson did enough damage. I'm going to say this. Pride rules, perhaps Shogun would have taken a split decision. The UFC rules, 10-point boxing must system, a system which they adopted from boxing. Dan Henderson still wins the fight. So some people are talking about having a rematch with him. I say no. I mean, yeah, I picked Shogun, but at the same time, Henderson did win 3 rounds, and it's out of a 5-round fight. Shogun, though looked completely dominant in the 5th round, did not do enough to finish off Henderson. However, I'll say this, Henderson is gassing a lot now. I mean, I think his age has taken over. You know, it's not just the weight cut anymore. So yeah, I mean, Henderson won. Hats off to him. How would he face up against someone like Lyoto Machida or John Jones, who at this point in time he's set to face the winner of that fight of UFC 140? I don't know. I think if John Jones wins, Dan Henderson's going to have a really long night. He'd have a better chance at beating Lyoto Machida than John Jones. Just the reach advantage would just be too insane for him. Okay, guys, so that concludes my review of UFC 139. I will not be doing any sort of preview for the Ultimate Fighter season finale. And other than that, please watch Eddie Alvarez versus Mike Chandler. It's a great fight. It's free. Do so. And other than that, take care.